Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for joining us for one of our talks today. I'm so thrilled today to be joined by the fantastic Brendan Hunt to talk all about Ted Lasso, who's the co-creator, executive producer, and of course, Coach Beard. And as a British and an American national, I actually wanted to ask you about the specificity of the humor and the way that the show so brilliantly captures both styles of humoristic comedy, because they're very different. So you've got, the lovely, hopeful optimism of the humor that comes through Ted, and then you've got the dry, kind of like very classic British humor in there as well. And it really merges together. So I just wanted to ask about the journey of making sure that you found both of those voices and bringing all of that into the show.
Yeah. In a weird way, I don't even think it comes from trying to replicate British comedy, which we're all huge fans of. Like I've been a fan of since high school, spending nights watching like Dave Allen at Large was on public TV, and Monty Python, a little more famous, but Monty Python and Dave Allen were just hugely important to me. Whereas I already knew to frown on Benny Hill and Upstairs Downstairs, which were also available. But English comedy comes from the English. So what we're trying to do is as we're set in England, just try to depict this place and its people as best we can, and then hopefully the humor is coming from that. We have a couple Brits on our writing staff, Brett Goldstein and Phoebe Walsh, who are both fantastic. Brett also plays Roy Kent. But yeah, we all, even before ever setting foot here, we love this place. So we're on some level, Ted Lasso is a among other things, a love letter to England and English culture. But yeah, of course, also English comedy, which had such a big effect on all of us from such a long way back.
And then I wanted to ask about the players and their positions as you were building out these characters, because, depending on what position a character plays, it actually says a lot about them. Roy being the captain, obviously the oldest player on the team, there's a whole storyline and whole plot threads that come in through that, forwards and defenses, there's different personality types that tend to go towards those types of positions. And so when you were first concocting all of the characters, what were some of the conversations around which position each of the characters were going to be in the show?
So one character for whom that was a big conversation was Jamie Tart. We knew he was going to be a glamour seeker, and so that gravitated toward the striker. But he could be a winger. Wingers are often very flashy. But yeah, we landed on just good old fashioned. He's a striker. He wants the goals. Because strikers are also sort of, in terms of the non-goalkeeper players, the outfield players, are the most individualistic, because a lot of them, they don't have to be connected to what the rest of the team is actually doing. They need to sort of be waiting on the line, waiting for a chance to go, and then collect the glory for what the whole team has done to set up that glory for them. And yeah, that fit Jamie down to a T. And as you say with Roy, besides being a captain, he's a defensive box-to-box midfielder. He is the beating heart of a team when it's on the pitch. He carries tons of responsibility, but just because that's what he has to do. I'm wondering if you hear the screaming child, by the way. If you are, I do apologize. It's not even mine. Don't know whose it is. Don't know who it is. I guess we're having people over. No, it's mine. It's fine. But are you hearing that? Is that a problem?
I actually don't hear it.
Yes.
It's just in your mind.
Oh, just in my mind, all the better. That would make sense. All I hear now is children crying all the time. Anyway, so yeah, Roy just being the beating heart of something, yeah, that lent itself to him being the all-important central midfielder.
And then one of the things that we saw the show start to explore, later in the season, particularly with Roy, is that sense of identity that's tied into being a football player. And I think that one of the things that you explore really well is the sense of identity and the journey of what it takes to be a football player, and the pipeline of going straight from school into that, because in the UK we don't have that collegiate system of playing. It's you come straight out of high school essentially and go straight into playing professionally. And so it's a very different style of how it becomes your entire life at such a young age and becomes completely all consuming. And so I was really interested in how that feeds into a lot of the dynamics of the characters, particularly when it comes to characters like Roy and like Jamie, where we've really seen that explored in some of the storylines.
Yeah, that's definitely an element of what's going on there. We don't get into it too much, but it's certainly, you know, Jamie has a lot of lines where he sounds dumb. And like we don't think he's dumb, but we do think he's undereducated because, prodigies just go do football and they do it all the time. And, if they let it, it can become the only thing they learn to know. I saw a clip of an interview with Robbie Williams recently from a Graham Norton interview he did. Oh, Google Robbie Williams, Graham Norton. That dude gets on Graham Norton and he just spins gold. But he sort of openly said at one point, like, I'm a pop star. I was in a boy band. There's lots of things I've never learned to do because people have always done it for me. And that really struck me as being part of what makes Jamie what he is. Like people have been doing things for him forever, and so that's part of why Keely was so good for him. When they were together, because she was challenging him and trying to bring him further into things in a way that his entitlements sort of never really allowed. So yeah, all that is part of the puzzle. We just don't explore it too much, but it's sort of like an assumed part of the tapestry of all these players.
Yeah. And I noticed something when Jason was talking about the casting of the show, where he mentioned that it was important to everybody to only have actors who were willing to come in and read and willing to come in and have meetings about the characters, and was curious about how that really informed a lot of the early character development as well, because then you have more of an opportunity to get a sense of what they're going to bring into the character once they take it on, and how that really helped you and the rest of the producing and writing team.
Yeah, it's there's so much of casting nowadays with actors who've made it to a certain level where everyone's offer only, as the term goes, which is all fine and good, but we wanted people who didn't just want to be wanted by us, but they wanted to be part of this, and so condescending to read for us, deigning to appear for us, meant a lot, because it's not just then how well they do the read, but it's getting a sense of that person and what their energy is and if it's complementary to ours. Hannah got the part not only because of how good her audition was, she was amazing. She was so amazing that they flew her out here like 2 days after she read. But then when she got here and had her, basically screen test with Jason, they got on like a house of fire because she's awesome. Her energy's fantastic. She's so funny. She's great to hang out with. And we wouldn't quite have known that just looking at an audition, no matter how excellent the audition was.
And then, obviously throughout the first season and filming, you've had such an opportunity now to see how these characters have really evolved with the cast playing them. So as you've been going into season 2, which you're in the midst of shooting right now, how has that continued to really evolve what you're able to do with these characters and the types of layers that you're able to add, because you already know intrinsically what that performer is going to bring into the room?
Yeah. I think and I'm not trying to dismiss any of that, but I think that actually goes both ways in terms of the scripts and the actors. Like now the actors have all seen the show, all of it, the totality of it, not just their scenes. They've seen what everyone else is doing. They see what the, what the DP was going for. They see, how the music affects things. So now coming into this season, like everyone's just a little bit better because they know what it is more. Not just internally, but like externally coming at them. So we absolutely are also writing better for them because we know what they're like and what they are and what their essences are. But yeah, they reciprocate that, wonderfully, and it's pretty cool to watch. Like watching the dailies of what we've shot so far, like all these actors who I thought were all so damn good already. Like I'm like they're so good. They're so fucking good. So yeah, it's just a cool, yin and yang situation, I guess.
And obviously you, Jason, and a lot of the rest of the creative team and the actors all come with like a great improv background. but it was very important for the show to be very scripted and to have all those details on the page so that then you can choose when to play around with it. And so when you're in the writing room and you're working on the scripts for the show, how does that then play into the way that you're really developing a lot of the minutiae of a scene and really thinking so specifically about every individual word? You know, how can we punch this joke up, rather than waiting until you get onto set to play around and do that?
Yeah, well, our scripts go through a number of stages, and we outline it in the room. The writer goes off and comes back with a draft. They get notes from Bill and Jason and the network and whatever. Then they write another draft, and it comes back to the writer's room, and the writers, are punching it up even more. Then eventually, some of us, not all of us, fly to England, and as the shoot comes closer, me, Joe, and especially Jason are taking final passes at it. And then, the night before a scene gets shot, whether he's in it or not, Jason is giving it the final pass. And then, as will always happen anyway, then still on set, we'll still occasionally think of like, no, this, that. But we're only able to do that on that final day because it's gone through all these stages of everyone who we are lucky to have a writer's room that just loves and gets the show, and as we say, gives a shit. We're only able to do that in the final day because of all the stages it goes through of people who give a shit.
Yeah. And then I wanted to talk about some of the juxtapositions of the character of Rebecca against the character of Ted, because when you look at them both, there's actually a lot of similarities between them in the fact that they're both dealing with the end of a relationship. They're trying to navigate heartbreak and what their sense of self-identity is outside of, what has been their life for several years. But yet, obviously, through the show, we see that they respond in very different ways to those situations. And so was there a conscious thought about some of the parallels between their journeys throughout the season with that in mind?
I'm going to give you a short answer of yes. And here's the vaguest spoiler I can ever give. We will see a little more of why they are kindred and parallel spirits in season 2.
I love it. That's very vague, and I'll definitely be ruminating on that throughout the day. I also want to talk about your work as a performer in the show as Coach Beard as well, because it's so brilliant with the way that you're able to give so much in a performance without words of dialogue at any point, even down to when you went on Seth Meyers, the clip that you gave them was one where you didn't have a single line at all. So you've definitely embraced it. And, I think that's a really fantastic skill to have as a performer. And so what are some of the unique challenges that sometimes come when you're filming scenes where there's very little dialogue or there's absolutely none, and you're really having to lean so heavily into the nonverbal part of your performance?
I mean, oddly enough, even though there's so few words, the hardest thing is to make sure I'm not doing too much. It's a restrained and sedentary acting style is not necessarily my go-to. It is what this character is, and so that is what I am certainly trying to do to the best of my abilities. But then when you're sort of, for lack of a better word, like caged in like that, sometimes you chafe at the stall and you want to come out too hard with the one line that you do have. And so, yeah, it's a constant battle to remind myself to trust the material and the character, and that a little bit goes a long way. Because it's been like a lifelong thing of learning how to act for camera. I didn't start doing any acting in front of camera until I'd been performing in crowded theaters for over a decade. And in those crowded theaters, you got to yell, you got to get to that person in the back of the house. And yeah, I'm now playing Coach Beard is like the final test of, do I know how to act for a camera? and I'm not quite there yet, but I'm certainly better than I would have been if we tried this 10 years ago, which would have been just a lot of twitching, constant twitching. Oh boy, the editors would have hated me.
And there's so many great moments between Coach and Ted where you're able to, say what would be 5 pages of dialogue in a single moment. An entire argument and debate about benching Roy can happen in 10 seconds in the show. And was that something that just felt very second nature to you and Jason as performers, to find what those singular looks were going to be because of the history that you have, and obviously the work that you're doing in developing this even before you arrive on set to shoot these scenes together?
Yeah, there's just kind of like almost a cheat code in there, in the fact that we've known each other for so long, and like there is a shared vocabulary of unspoken words that is just there whenever we're around each other, whether we like it or not. And so it's there when cameras are on or when cameras are not. So yeah, cheat code is the best way I can think of it. Yeah, it's a cheat code. Sorry, I must confess I'm vegging out slightly at the end of all these interviews, but
it's okay. You've also got a newborn baby keeping you awake, and you're filming an entire series right now.
Do you hear the crying? I hear crying somewhere.
And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about the backstory and history of their relationship and their rapport together as characters, because you get the sense that it's a really deep-seated history with that closeness that we get to see on screen. And even just the fact that Coach Beard picks up his entire life and moves it, likely knowing and understanding exactly the genesis of why Ted wants to escape his life and run over to the UK. And for someone to pick up their life and follow is such a huge gesture and act of, love within a friendship as well. And so how did that really develop so much of a lot of the core of that loyalty that he brings and what he gives to people that he allows to get close to him?
Yeah, so we think that Ted and Beard's relationship is a big chunk of it is that at some point Beard was getting too far with stuff. He was living in a meth den or a trailer in the desert, something. And Ted saved him, essentially. So he feels a bit of debt to Ted, and like he's experienced the power of the lasso way, and the way looking at things with a slightly more optimistic attitude can have a ripple effect throughout the rest of your life. But having said that, he definitely lives alone. So when Ted calls up one day and says, "Hey, I think I'm going to do this job in London," I think his first thought is, "You're not going to be able to do that by yourself. Oh, you're going to need somebody. I'm going with you." "Oh yeah? Oh, that'd be great. Okay, sure, that'd be fine." Ted wouldn't have even had to ask. Whether he did or not, we'll find out someday perhaps. But yeah, it's just automatic now. It's not even a thought that he has, that whatever it is that Ted needs, Beard's got nothing better to do than make sure Ted has that.
And within their relationship dynamic as well, obviously like the Ted Lassos of the world are so wonderful. And I feel like I'm about to say something very controversial, but there is that thing in which we see where Coach Beard has to always be the person to kind of say no to things and, be the hard man as well. And there can be a struggle with that. And it feels like that's part of what leads up to the little breakdown that we see towards the end of season 1. And so I was interested in that dynamic and how you wanted to think about that as like a little bit of responsibility, that he's the person that has to say no. He's the person that always has to say what Ted can't bring himself to say, or convince him to do the thing that nobody actually wants to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all a subset of, we have this positive character, but he's not a positive character living on, on the board of Candyland. It's a positive character who is constantly being confronted with reality. Like, people talk about how this show helps them, forget their troubles, but it's not because no one in the show has troubles. Like, we find positivity by going through harder things and discovering at the end that we've survived, essentially. So, which is a long way of saying Ted has many different kinds of collision with reality. Some are detrimental, but some, as come from Beard, are essential. Like, he can't do this job well unless he confronts the reality of he really does need to win. Like, this can't just be lessons and aphorisms and psalms all the time. So Beard's not trying to piss him off or rile him up. Beard is doing his duty of supporting Ted by reminding Ted where he's falling short. It's truly tough love.
Yeah. And And when you're working on your character development for this show, because you've been so intrinsically involved in every single aspect of who he is and you know so many of the details, how is that a completely different process for you as an actor and as a performer to other roles where you're coming in, you know, at the script stage where everything's written and you're just coming in to deliver that once everything's in production?
Well, it's not easier, that's for sure. You know, it takes more of me in the, you know, in the best way possible, like it's draining in a good way. I like doing shows every once in a while where I'm, you know, a hired gun, for lack of a better word, and I come in and I stand where they tell me to stand, and I say what they tell me to say, and I do that to the best of my abilities, and then I drive home, and I'm not thinking about it anymore. That's a fine, like, change of pace, you know, palate cleanser for the artistic soul. But at the end of the day, I much prefer this of, it needs every part of me I got. It needs it all the time. It's both draining and enlivening. Like I love not having to choose between, do I like being more on camera or being behind the scenes. I like being behind the scenes for things where I'm on camera. Like I want to help the show to the degree that I can from as many angles as I possibly can.
Yeah. And then I actually wanted to ask about one of the locations within the show, which is, you know, the central pub location, because I've heard you say that there was a pub in Richmond that you all fell in love with and became, you know, your go-to pub. And that then when you were building out a lot of the sets, that you had the production design team essentially replicate your favorite pub. So then you had it as a location when you were filming and a place to go to for drinks after. But I was really interested in, you know, the decision behind replicating it, and, you know, were there any conversations about whether you might be able to shoot on location in that pub rather than building an entirely new one at any point?
Yeah, so it's not so much that it was our favorite pub as it is that when we came to Richmond, Jason and I to do some auditions and look at sets, that was the pub that is on Richmond Green. Like, we knew we were going to use Richmond Green. And we went to this one pub, you know, they took us there, including the production designer, Paul Cripps, who was a genius. And it was like, this place is great. This place is great. And I think Paul himself just said, like, so we're thinking of just rebuilding this pub. And we looked around. Can we do that? Yeah, man. Because it is great. That pub is great. There's another pub right around the corner that's also great. But yeah, you know, it's a tiny way of demonstrating how authentic we would like to be in terms of depicting our British things here and there. Like, we're not just making our idea of a British pub. We've made a British pub that we already go to and frequent and love, and we get a kick out of it. You know, whenever we're in one or the other, because it's still in both from time to time. It's a bizarro world, sliding doors, you know, Stargate portal of the soul. Like, figuring out, like, okay, and if I look outside now, is that really the green, or is that the big, you know, canvas drop that they painted that looks like the green? Which one am I in? Because I get tired. I just get tired sometimes. You know how it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Baby's crying. Ugh, it's just confusing.
Baby's crying. Football is crying.
Yeah.
And speaking of the green and a lot of the football scenes within the show, you know, it is that thing where it is a workplace comedy, but when you have those scenes within the games, they have to have that really high level of authenticity, even if we're only seeing 30 seconds of what's actually happening on the pitch, because it has to tell, you know, a 90-minute story of what that game is and everything that's happened. And you do such a good job at really bringing it into the intimacy of the characters and what's happening, and small minutiae of communication between the players on the pitch or even on the sidelines. And so just wanted to talk a little bit about the way in which you all have approached bringing in that level of authenticity and always thinking about the intimacy of the situation, even though, you know, it's a scene taking place on a huge football field.
Yeah, well, you know, none of us played soccer much. We all discovered it late in life in terms of the creators of the show. Bill Lawrence is very fond of reminding people that he won a state championship as a goalie, but he hates soccer now. He's insufferable about soccer. He's great about everything else. But we really wanted it to, since we don't have the ability to show soccer as it is per se, because we're not really of it, we do love it. And we are, you know, trying to be as affectionate with what we do not know as much as possible. But one of the reasons why soccer is so great is because it is operatic. It is so dramatic, and it's dramatic because of what those people on the field who aren't wearing helmets, aren't wearing pads, are going through. It is of such a Greek tragic scale in terms of the stakes of it, but it's the stakes of just simple people who are just trying to live through it. So yeah, it all just comes down to we love it. We love soccer. We hope we do right by it the best we can, and do right by the people who make it so great.
And you did a soccer-based show in Edinburgh years ago called Ironic Yanks. And what was kind of the main subject and through line of that show? And was there weirdly anything that when you were making this show, suddenly you were like, oh, that reminds me of that time that I was in Edinburgh years ago and we did this original show?
Yes, that was a two-hander with Seth Meyers, who had to leave before the run ended because he'd gotten this job at 30 Rock in New York City. That worked out pretty well for him. And the sort of main conceit was that we felt that America would win the World Cup before England wins one again, which still in play. And we talked a lot about in that show about how England's failures in various soccer tournaments, the national team's failures, were Shakespearean and tragic and almost created a masochistic desire on the part of the English populace to lose tragically rather than ever win, because losing tragically seemed to result in all these books about it and all this suffering. And I do think that comes out in the show a little bit, just in the embracing of the notion of it's the hope that kills you, which is such a fantastically English way of looking at sports. And, if you're not careful, life.
Yeah. And I also love that part of the initial genesis of this character and, ultimately now this show was Jason coming to visit you in Amsterdam and a mushroom trip, which involved describing football and going into a lot of the minutiae of it. And so what can you take as a life lesson from taking a mushroom trip that then years later has resulted in a multi-award winning television series that's internationally adored?
Life lesson number one, legalize mushrooms. Read some of the books out there on them, including How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollack, which is about all the studies people are doing about the legitimate therapeutic natures of it, therapeutic attributes of it. But yeah, it's so lucky that happened. I mean, he came at a time when I was trying to write Ironic Yanks because that was going to come out the next summer. So I just very much had soccer thoughts in the brain, and about how a national team can represent that nation's culture, and a culture can be explained through a national team. And yeah, Jason patiently let me blather and blather and blather and blather, and here we are. Thank you, mushrooms.
Amazing. Well, I think we're all better off for that mushroom trip. Thank you so much, Brendan, for this great conversation. Really appreciate it. And good luck with everything in wrapping up season 2.
Thank you, Mara.